So first of all, I want to thank you all for coming today here to the Contemporary Gallery, and especially thank you to Jennifer for doing this together and allow us to record this conversation about your show. And first I want to say that my wife and I, we have been following your work for a while. We really love your work. We really love to have this exhibition here at the Contemporary. We have one of your pieces in the living room, and it's always a conversation piece when people come into the house, and they ask us about the piece. And that's what I love about your work, that it's a work that invites conversation in various ways. And in the case, the one that we have in our home, it's kind of a dark piece like some of the ones here in the show. And sometimes people ask, but why did you like that? And that's exactly what fascinates me about your work, what I like about the show. You have been working in various series, so I've known you for a while, since we went to school together. And you have worked in various series. You have done figurative, you have done objects, you have done obscure themes also, you have done like the body parts or the animal parts for a while too. But this series, this body of work, seems to be a work that is really maturing, and it keeps expanding, it keeps going. And I feel like this is right now just the beginning of something that keeps growing. I don't know how much you want to continue it, but to me it's kind of an ongoing exploration that perhaps, you can tell us more later, perhaps you encountered it and it gave you something back that you could not stay away from it, that you keep coming back to it. And because I think that's kind of the beauty of our art, like a sweet candy that we are as artists, when we taste it, we keep coming back to it, even though sometimes it might be difficult, hard, challenging, and so forth. And so when I come into an exhibition like this one, I love it because it invites us to visit the other within ourselves. We are kind of in a culture that we live in today, where before this talk we're talking about social media, right? And we are all surrounded by people, always posting people, and we know what everyone else is doing superficially. But this kind of show invites us to look within, like the area that no one knows. That space, which maybe you call it as title of the show, elsewhere in other realities. That space that no one wants to get the Instagram picture of, right? That place that no one wants to know my dream, my otherness, my secret, or that other, which whatever it could be. Which this exhibition kind of invites us to do that, to connect is that memory that still exists here, that something might be happening throughout the day, but that triggers it. And so kind of this exhibition is kind of like many triggers that can, for many of us, in one way or another, pull something out from the back, that which nobody sees, that which nobody gets. So maybe tell us a little bit about how this whole thing began and how it has continued.
I've been intrigued with a couple of things, like literature, death, and I don't mean I'm intrigued with death like I want to know about it. I wanted to explore the idea or the themes of it. And my early work was really mostly about that particular topic. Then I started thinking about where we're all at in our private lives and how that connects with the idea of death in a sense. Because we're, like you said, we're showing what everybody's doing on social media. We see all of that. What we don't see is when we close the door and we're alone in our private thoughts and what's happening. So I'll connect that back with the literature, I'm sorry. I've read a lot of books, a lot of poetry. A lot of it started with some of the earlier pieces, like The Forehead. This one under the Birth and Affliction, those started with a collaboration between myself and my writer. And we were kind of bouncing off ideas off one another. He started writing a story. I started photographing, with those things in mind: death, religion, secrets, solitariness. So like those sorts of themes that we were.
Were both of you aware of what Ethan was writing or photographing?
Yes. So I would photograph. I would show him. He would write. I would read it.
Okay.
So we were kind of going back and forth, and that's really like where it started from. And quite honestly, I feel like that kind of collaboration helped me explore those things even more deeply than I had in the past. And I don't necessarily know if my people are dead. That's not what I'm like. I know when I do some of the feedback that I get, it's like, why is she laying on the floor dead? It looks like someone pushed you off the balcony and you're laying there. And that's not like my intent, really. My intent was more like this secret or private thought or private moment. Maybe a sense of the world closing in on her, or on any one of them, actually. But I think that's sort of where it really stemmed from.
It's interesting that we talk about the idea of death, especially a lot of the figures have the white dress, or the white clothing, almost like the afterlife. And almost like the piece with the triptych, the water, to me it's almost like a piece about passage, the before, past, present, future, before, now, and then after. Almost like, also has like this religious connotation, almost like baptism in a way. It's very interesting. The figure kind of goes in a transition from one to another. So I can see now kind of that idea of passage.
And that's like it doesn't necessarily relate to death in the sense that you're dying. One of the things that I've always done is I've tried to create a work that was autobiographical in nature, or at least very personal to me. So some of the things that I'm dealing with are like that. Not necessarily the triptych, some of the elements like the white dresses and even just standing alone with the forehead and the self-portrait, the wedding dress, last one of my dresses. Those are, I think, in a sense, okay, so it's not like death, like you're dying and you're going to go to the world. It's more like a death of yourself, like losing yourself in some capacity. And some of those things are like motherhood, marriage, career changes, things like that. So it's more like a symbol for those things. So that is like a death in and of itself.
Not a physical, right?
Yeah, not physical death.
And that's what I think of the idea of passage. One is always on a direction, and there's always a passage. I go from junior high to high school, from high school to college, from single to married, from etc. There's always these passages in life that kind of give us something that puts some sort of memory on us as well.
Can you say something?
I'm going to open for some questions at the end. Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I see on the work your work is there are very calculated interventions on how you plan the scene, right? It definitely there's definitely a lot of thought and a lot of kind of planning the scene. I would think, and what you want, how you want the image to be portrayed, the type of surrounding elements, because the elements that surround are all part of the same out of the work. And the work is as much about what we see and what we don't see beyond the frame, and that conversation that happens with that. If you can tell us a little bit about your process of how this calculated, I want to call it intervention.
It's calculated. I draw horrible sketches, and I do that because I want to plan out what I'm going to do. Sometimes I see space, and I'm like, oh my god, I need to do something with that. And I'll go home and I have a book and I write it in there. And I won't just sketch. I'll write my words in there as well, like a sort of like poetry. It's not. It's just fragments and words and thoughts, and put them all onto that piece of paper. And sometimes it goes like as planned, like the forehead. That one was I ran past that space. It was like on my running trail. I saw it, and I was like, that's it. That's the spot, and I know exactly what I want. And luckily, she was available, like as before that little, because that isn't a huge lake or anything. It's literally just a tiny little pond. Yeah, it dried up in 2 days. A little bit of water, and everything just seemed to really work. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes it doesn't happen. Like the one where she's laying on the floor here.
Okay.
That one, it didn't happen because I had a whole thing planned and it was sketched out and I knew exactly what I wanted. And when I got there, something didn't work correctly with the tripod, so we switched. And I took a moment, I looked around, I saw what I wanted to do and sketched it out in my head. But it is a lot of planning. It's a lot of like pre-planning, a lot of thoughts in my head, and then visualizing and then putting it on paper, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. One can, and that's what I meant also when I said that this body of work is very mature. You know, there's a lot of thought not only on the message, but also the construction of the scene and what goes on to make the scene possible, which I think that brings the whole exhibition to a higher level. I think there's also another recurring idea that I see when it's like childhood. You know, because there's a lot of kids in various positions in various ways. Sometimes more visible and obvious versus sometimes a lot more kind of hidden and takes a minute to find it. But there's a lot of that with the youthfulness of some of the images, even like the one here next to you with the young girl and the empty nest. So childhood, I think for many of us, it's not only a kid, but it brings back to our own memories of childhood, you know, and which I think that it goes really well with what you're trying to work in here, you know, that the childhood, that what we once were kids, and some of the things that we didn't understand as kids, but now almost as adults we see them in a new way. So I don't know, what is the role of the kids in it?
Well, quite honestly, I photograph who's available. That's like number one. And my kids are obviously available to me all the time. But that doesn't mean that that's the only reason I'm photographing them. Certainly, I think there's something with maybe not childhood necessarily, but like an element, like an innocence that you're kind of talking about. So the innocent part of it, I think, is maybe a bit of a juxtaposition between the innocence of the children and maybe like the deeper themes like that are going on in some of the other ones. And I also think that it's a little bit about that transition that you were talking about, going from one to the other. And I think that's what I see when I'm photographing the children, not necessarily like childhood or the joys of childhood or anything like that. It's maybe more that transition from that younger themes or innocent themes to maybe a little bit more like secretive and slightly sinister, I want to say. Like there's a slight sinister quality to them. Like something just off.
Right. And I think that's what keeps us pulling, keeps us pulling into the story, to create that story. And before we open it to some questions from the guests, what are some of the people that have influenced you in your career or even for this body of work?
That's a good question. Quite honestly, I am influenced by all types of literature. I would say that would be my most influence. But I try to find influence in everything. I know it sounds so cliche, but I do. I walk into a studio and someone's painting, and I can, if I feel it, maybe like darker themes are more influencing to me than like the happy, landscapes, which I just don't embrace. So I think of course, there's that. And I maybe another cliche thing, but surrealists. Like,
Okay.
I think surrealism has influenced me beyond.
Definitely we can see it. So.
Yeah.
Wonderful.